It was meant to be a typical Tuesday. A quick grocery run, then picking up my daughter, Lily, from school before her ballet class. But a wrong turn and a distracted driver shattered everything. I got to the hospital, her blood covering me, my hands shaking as I begged the ER nurse to save her. My 8-year-old, my sunshine, my miracle after years of infertility, lay unconscious, hooked up to tubes, machines, and wires. Her spine fractured, ribs shattered, left lung collapsing, but she was alive. That's all that mattered to me. I sat by her side for hours, refusing to eat or sleep, just holding her tiny hand, whispering, "Mommy's here. I won't leave you." Then my phone rang. It was my mother. "Are you done being dramatic?" she snapped the moment I answered. "Your brother has an investor meeting today. Your daughter being in the hospital makes the family look unstable." I blinked. Disbelieving, "Mom, she almost died." She cut me off. "Your brother needs your support more than your child does right now. He has a future. That girl is just, well, let's not pretend she was ever going to amount to much. She's just like you. Fragile." I couldn't speak, but my silence emboldened her. "Honestly, if she doesn't make it, maybe it's for the best. Focus on someone who has a real shot in life. Your brother's pitch could mean millions. Are you really going to skip it because of a kid?" I hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry. Not when my mom dismissed my daughter's life as expendable. Not when my father texted me that night saying, "Listen to your mother. You're too emotional. Lily's just a kid. There will be others." Others. Lily wasn't a placeholder. She was my reason to breathe. The next morning, I entered Lily's room to find her awake, weak, tubes still in her chest, but her big brown eyes fluttered open and found mine. "Mommy," she whispered, and I broke. I sobbed into her blanket like never before. I didn't tell her what Grandma said. I just kissed her forehead and promised her everything would be okay. But something fierce, something final, changed in me that morning. When my parents arrived at the hospital with a smug air of forced concern, they brought balloons and a tray of bakery cookies, as if a cheap gesture could erase their cruelty. My mother leaned in, looked at my child, bruised, half broken, and muttered, "What a shame, such a pretty face. Wasted." Then she turned to me and whispered with a saccharine smile, "Don't get too attached. It's still touch and go, right? Your brother could really use you tonight. Think about the family." I didn't blink or flinch, but I recorded her words on my phone in my pocket. The nurse came in just then, and my mother's voice shifted into sugary sweetness. "Oh, she's such a fighter, isn't she?" I wanted to scream, but I stayed calm. That night, I told the doctors my parents were not to be allowed back in under any circumstances. Not even to peek through the glass. They protested. My father even tried bribing the head nurse. But I made sure their names were blacklisted because I had heard everything. And I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. For the next 5 days, I barely left Lily's hospital room. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive, but the road ahead would be hard. 2 surgeries, physical therapy, a year, maybe more before she could walk again. But she was alive, and I wasn't letting her go. Meanwhile, the vultures circled. My brother Daniel called once. Not to ask how Lily was doing, but to complain. "You could have come to the pitch, you know," he said. "We lost the investor. Dad's furious you're being selfish as always." I stared at the phone, disbelieving. "Selfish?" He scoffed. "Come on, she's stable now. You clinging to her bedside won't change anything. I needed you. She's 8. Daniel. She almost died, and I'm 29. I almost lost a $2.3 million deal." That was the last thing he said before hanging up. The next day, I got an email from my father. He wrote, "Your behavior is becoming embarrassing. Family doesn't abandon family, especially not in front of investors. Your daughter's accident, while unfortunate, should not derail everyone else's life. We raised you better than this." It was signed, "Regards, Dad." No love, no emotion, just corporate coldness. But I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted a lawyer, a therapist, and a trauma specialist pediatric care coordinator. Because while my parents rallied around my golden brother, I was building a fortress for my child. By week 3, Lily could sit up with help. She smiled again. Her voice was stronger. She asked me to read her favorite book, The Paper Garden. And when I cried halfway through, she wiped my tears with her tiny hand and whispered, "It's okay. Mommy, you're stronger than anyone." I hugged her and knew what I had to do. My parents had always treated me like the family burden. Too soft, too emotional, too unlike Daniel, whom they called the future. When I graduated with honors, they skipped my ceremony for a real estate auction. When I had a miscarriage 3 years ago, my mother told me, "God takes the weak." And when Lily was born prematurely, they visited once, brought no gift, and said, she better not slow you down. But I stayed quiet for too long. Not anymore. I took all the recordings, every voicemail, every cruel comment from my mother's hospital visit, the laugh, the let her die remark, the investment emails my father had forwarded, pressuring me to leave the hospital mid-surgery. Then I sent everything to the board of directors of my father's company, to the wives of my father's golf club friends, to the CEO who had been evaluating Daniel's pitch, and I attached a simple caption. This is what they consider family values. What followed was nuclear. My father was called into emergency meetings. Daniel's funding evaporated overnight, and I moved Lily to a private pediatric recovery center on the coast using the emergency trust fund my grandmother had left me, the same one my parents always pretended didn't exist. I changed our number, filed a legal restraining order, blocked every number they tried to use, and finally, in a calm, well-lit courtroom 2 weeks later, I faced my parents during the hearing and read the final sentence of the therapist's report aloud. The child's trauma was worsened not by the accident, but by emotional negligence and verbal abuse from her own blood relatives. The judge nodded slowly, and then I said the words I never thought I'd have the courage to say. My daughter is not disposable, and I am no longer your daughter. 3 months passed. Lily had learned how to walk again. Slow, shaky steps between parallel bars, her face lit up with determination. Every time she stumbled, she laughed. And every time she laughed, I cried quietly, privately, because her resilience had rebuilt the parts of me I didn't even know were broken. Our world was peaceful now. No surprise phone calls, no forced dinners, no venom in the form of fake concern. We rented a small beachside apartment where the sea whispered instead of my mother's voice echoing through my skull. Until one morning, the past came knocking. Not a figure of speech. It literally knocked. A woman stood at my door, early 50s, face pinched with panic. Silk scarf crooked, designer handbag clutched in shaking hands. My mother, behind her, just stepping out of a black sedan, was my father. I didn't move. Sweetie, she started, smiling like nothing had happened. We're here to see Lily. My heart dropped, but I stayed still. I read what you posted, she said, shifting uneasily. That wasn't fair. You were upset. You took it out of context. She heard you say it, I replied coldly. You laughed. My father stepped forward, arms out like he was delivering a sermon. Enough of this melodrama. Do you think destroying your own family makes you a hero? Do you know how hard it's been for us? Hard for them. You came to see Lily. I asked. That's funny because last I checked, you said she was an inconvenience. My mom's voice dropped to a hiss. She's still your responsibility, not ours. But if you post one more thing about this, we'll sue for defamation. I stared at them. Then I opened the door wider, just enough to let Lily peek through. She stood there in her tiny pink robe, clutching a soft bear, her eyes curious. My mother smiled wide. Hi, sweetheart. Nana came to visit. Lily looked at her for a long time, then turned to me and whispered, Is she the lady who laughed when I almost died? My mother froze. I crouched to Lily's height and said gently, Yes, baby, that's her. Lily took a step back and closed the door herself. I never saw my parents again after that day, not in person. Anyway, but their world collapsed faster than they could patch it. See, the recordings weren't the only thing I kept. I had paper trails, tax evasion files, emails of hush money settlements buried under false company names documents my father assumed were deleted years ago when I worked as his assistant before going back to school. And I waited until the day Daniel's second startup, built from my father's silent funding, launched with fanfare. That's when I sent the file to the IRS, the press, and the FBI. Within 6 weeks, my father's assets were frozen. My brother's startup was slapped with an injunction. And my mother, well, her socialite calendar dried up overnight. Charity boards quietly removed her name, her monthly brunches canceled. No one wanted to be photographed next to the woman whose granddaughter almost died while she laughed. I received exactly one more email from them. It read, Congratulations, you've ruined us. Hope you're proud. I didn't respond because I was busy. Lily had started her own little blog, a recovery diary for kids who were healing from people, not just accidents. She named it Sunlight after the storm. And one day, while reading it aloud to her school class, she introduced me with the words, This is my mom. She's not just my hero, she's the reason I'm alive. That's the only award I've ever needed. So, no, I didn't ruin my family. They did that themselves. I just lit the match and walked away with my daughter in my arms. And this time, I didn't look back.